In December, an article in Harper's called The Ghosts in the Machine by Liz Pelly made waves across the music industry for describing how Spotify gamed their own system by creating quote-unquote ghost artists. To sum it up, Spotify allegedly hired production companies to make music that they called perfect fit content for a lower royalty rate, and then encouraged their playlist editors to put those songs on their editorial playlists, allegedly. This was a practice that was mostly restricted to specific genres like lo-fi or ambient music, the type of stuff that one might imagine is being played in the background. This was a part of Spotify's argument in defending the program. Most of this stuff was being listened to in the background anyway, so who cares? Well, I would imagine the artists who make ambient music and make lo-fi music probably care, so I'm not sure how much I'm buying that. This only affected a sliver of genres and artists. So if you were a fan of like rap music, R&B, pop, and you were afraid that you were listening to ghost artists when you saw the title of that article, then you might be exhaling right now. And if you were an artist who thought that this scheme was taking a spot away from you, unless you make lo-fi or ambient music, probably not the case, for now. But the notion of making music that's optimized to fit on a Spotify playlist isn't just restricted to this program. Ever since the boom in streaming services and the rise in popularity of their curated playlists leveled out the playing field for bedroom artists and unsigned acts across the world, the thought has crept into the minds of many an artist trying to make a living. Is this song gonna make it on a playlist? And then comes the follow-up thought. Is there anything I can do to this song to increase the chances of that? Artists might not admit that they're thinking about that in the studio, but as an artist myself, and as someone who talks to a lot of other artists, I can tell you that many of them absolutely do, or have at least thought it once or twice. And even if you don't want to take my word for it, you can see how artists are optimizing their releases for streaming services on the album level by bloating their albums, dropping quote-unquote deluxe albums that are basically entirely new albums, waterfalling their releases. It's all stuff that I've talked about on this channel before. Streaming is running the game right now, and playlists are one of the best ways to take advantage of that. And so if artists are optimizing their music in the studio to fit on streaming services, or as I call it, making playlist core music, then what does that sound like? What is playlist core? How do we know it when we hear it? In talking to artists about it, it came down to three main attributes: making a specific genre to try to fit on a specific playlist, getting rid of intros in their songs to get to the good part as fast as possible, and making their songs just overall shorter. The first one, making songs for a specific playlist, while it's definitely happening, is a lot harder to generalize because there are so many different playlists for so many different genres. And it's hard to analyze at a larger scale because of how subjective that concept is. So I'll just share some of the anecdotes that I got from my friends. One told me that she would straight up reverse engineer songs on the popular playlists in her genre to try and increase her chances of getting on there. Another said, "In my experience doing sessions in both New York and LA, one of the most common and most frustrating things I've heard is, well, let's listen to a few songs from insert trending playlist here and see what we come up with," in reference to that playlist. When Lorem was popping off, it felt like every session I was in was writing to be on that playlist for some reason. It really ran the game for a little bit. Pollen too. What's funny is, from personal experience, I've had a song get on Lorem, and today that is my 19th most popular song. And it's been lapped by plenty of songs that never touched the Spotify playlist at all. And for as much as Spotify is supposed to be the great equalizer for independent artists, if people are making stuff that sounds exactly like what's already popular on these Spotify playlists, then it's like we're back in the days of radio, aren't we? Those other two things that artists told me about getting rid of their intros or shortening their songs, we can really look into those, and we can really find some cold hard data and try to figure out if there are any defining characteristics of what I like to call playlist core music. Are there real specific things that we can identify across songs? Or is it more about a vibe, a feeling, an aura? I said aura. This video is sponsored by Aura. Think about the number of spam calls or texts that you receive in a day. If you're anything like me, it's a ton. I actually got so frustrated about them that I went and made a whole video about it on social media. Have you ever found yourself second guessing whether a text message was real or a scam? Even if you're good at figuring it out yourself. Think about your loved ones. I know my dad comes to me with spam texts like, "Is this real?" all the time. What about a time when you were waiting for an important call? Did you end up answering every unknown number just in case? How did that experience make you feel? Aura will help you remove your personal information from data brokers and people search sites that can sell your info to identity thieves, scammers, and more. Aura monitors your personal data, including your social security number, across billions of data points, like the dark web and public court records, to alert you about potential identity theft. You'll get notified in minutes when your credit file has been compromised. Like if someone tries to open credit cards and loans in your name. This is just scratching the surface of what you can get with Aura. There's Aura VPN, which protects your internet connection with military-grade encryption. There's antivirus services to secure your Android, PC, or Mac from malware, including viruses, spyware, trojans, ransomware, and more. There's a password manager to store your online passwords securely and conveniently across apps. I wish I had this back when my Instagram got hacked and some guy in Turkey was asking all my fans for money. You can get all this in one app at an affordable price. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches and brokers. And if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/HADJI to try 2 weeks for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed. Thanks again to Aura for sponsoring this video. Let's get back into it. It takes 53 seconds before we hear Robert Plant's voice on the legendary Led Zeppelin song Stairway to Heaven. The Return of the Mac intro is only 22 seconds long, but the oh wow, oh yeah might be the most iconic part of the song. Everybody loves a good intro, and there is no doubt that the epic 30-second long or minute-long intro is harder and harder to find in popular music these days. A 2017 article in the BBC called The Dying Art of the Great Song Intro attempts to unpack it all. In the beginning, they cite that the average intro time has dropped from 20 seconds to 5 seconds since the mid-1980s. A big reason why, of course, isn't that people dislike intros. It's that skipping songs is just so much easier than it used to be. In the days of vinyl, you had to physically get up and move the needle to move on to the next song. With CD players, you had to hit a physical button, which if you had a CD player like in your living room and you were sitting on the couch, you still had to get up. But with streaming though, chances are all you have to do is tap one thing. Even if your phone is over there, if your AirPods are in, you can just click twice. It's never been easier to skip to the next song. So the barrier for how badly you want to skip a song has dropped. And so many artists have hypothesized that maybe the best way to avoid that is to just give the people what they want right from the beginning. One artist said the following: "So off the bat, I can tell you in the past, I have followed the advice to have the vocals come in within the first 3 seconds because of the data that says songs with longer intros are more likely to be skipped. Any graph that I can find definitely correlates the idea that most people are going to skip right from the beginning. So it's no wonder that artists decide to lay it all on the table right from the beginning." This BBC article is almost a decade old now. That's right, 2017, 8 years ago. And anecdotally, I'm not so sure that the intro is quote-unquote out. Let's look at some career-making breakout hits over the past few years. Because again, if we're thinking about artists that are aspiring to be on playlists, these are the guys who kind of broke through and made it, right? Tommy Richmond's 2024 breakout hit $1 Million Baby has an intro that is either 13 or 26 seconds long, depending on whether the drums coming in ends the intro or his voice coming in ends the intro. And again, kind of deciding what the intro is a little bit subjective. There are songs like Pink Pantheress and Ice Spice's Boys a Liar Part 2, where it just drops right in and there is no intro. Somewhere in the middle is Olivia Rodrigo's Driver's License, which has 8 seconds of car noises and ethereal background stuff before she starts singing. Benson Boone's Beautiful Things has about 7 seconds of intro. You could even argue that because TikTok makes random parts of a song go viral, and that can kind of drive its listenership, that perhaps in 2025, people are more willing to sit through an intro of a song than they were in 2017 when we were in the peak of that like Spotify rewiring our brains era. Just a hypothesis though. These songs that I've talked about, the $1 Million Babies of the world, they're smash hits, career-making hits. So what about the songs that are just regular old successes? You know, songs that maybe got on a Spotify playlist. I decided to test whether or not playlists are rewarding songs with no intro. Now my methodology isn't the most scientific, but I gave it a good shot. First, to avoid getting too much of one genre, I went for a playlist that has a mix of genres on it. New Music Friday, which for those who aren't big Spotify users, is 100 of the songs that came out that week that Spotify has decided are the most important or whatever. It's a very coveted playlist for people in the music industry. I did this for the week of December 27th, which because it coincided with the holidays, and infamously that's a time when the music industry is shut down, I wondered if maybe that would negatively affect the results. But actually I think it might make them more accurate, because a lot of the artists who are dropping that week are dropping because they know a lot of A-list artists are not dropping that week. So they feel like they might have a better shot of getting one of those 100 slots. So I counted how long the intros were for all 99 songs on the playlist. That's right, one of the songs was apparently like grayed out and taken down after making it on New Music Friday, which that's gotta suck. I mean, that's a bag fumble. And here's what I got. Rather than just average it out, I did a full box plot analysis because remember, you're dealing with a high school math teacher here. I live for this shit. The interquartile range, which describes the difference between the 75th percentile and the 25th percentile, was 12 seconds. The median was 9 seconds. and the Mode, which is the most popular single intro length out of all of them, was 0 seconds. So there are a lot of artists who do drop right into it, which is what the Mode tells us. But it seems like the most likely outcome is like 8 to 12 seconds, which is twice as long as what the BBC said. The big outlier with 54 seconds was the song by the amazing R&B band Slop. They're kind of doing their own thing, so I don't think they're worried too much about what's going to make it on a playlist. Now, of course, there is a little bit of subjectivity in here, because who am I to decide when an intro ends and the song begins? Is it when the first vocals come in? What if there are like vocal effects in the background? Does that count? And for EDM songs where vocals aren't really the focus, like, is it just when the big drums come in? You know, it's kind of subjective, but I tried my best. And the data tells us that you absolutely can have a pretty long intro and still make it on a Spotify playlist. With the median being 9 seconds, we see plenty of songs with intros that are twice as long as what the BBC described. But if you're not a band like Slop, maybe you don't need to do a whole minute, but otherwise you can. And also, you can totally just drop in off the rip as well. Also, I just want to say that skimming through New Music Friday is actually a lot of fun. Found a bunch of great songs from artists that I'd either never heard of or maybe heard of but never really checked out. Also, some of them made my HADJI's Heat playlist, which, if you guys are ever looking for new music, I post 15 songs on there every week. I'll put the link to that in the description. But to close it out, I don't think having a bit of intro is going to stop you from getting on a playlist. This is one theory about playlist core music that we might have to put to the side for now. And I also want to have a disclaimer before I leave the intro section. Not having an intro isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it can be an artistic choice to drop right into it. An example would be a song like My Gingy by Sunset Rollercoaster, which opens right on the hook, but it's also almost 7 minutes long, and it has this instrumental section in the end that goes on for like a minute or a minute and a half, and then it just abruptly cuts off like mid-bar. It's like definitely not a song that was like optimized for Spotify playlists, but it does have no intro. You know what I mean? Having no intro doesn't mean you're devoid of art. I just want to state that to be clear. I think it can be a very cool artistic choice to not have an intro. Now, another interesting tidbit that I got from some artists was about song length, and this has been a hot button discourse in music for the past few years. Artists like Pink Panthers are seen as the face of this zoomer core, brain rot, under 2 minutes, sauteed attention span core music, because people can no longer be entertained by the same thing for longer than 2 minutes. And there is some data that would back this up. In 2024, the Washington Post did an analysis that showed that since 1990, the average song length on the Billboard Hot 100 has decreased from 4 minutes and 14 seconds to 3 minutes and 15 seconds, shaving off a whole minute. That's the kind of work that would make a runner very proud and an old head sick to their stomach. You'll notice that from looking at the graph, Hot 100 songs in the 2020s are almost 30 seconds longer than they were in the 1950s and the 1960s, so it's not like this is a permanent decline that goes like this. And because of that, I feel like there's more to it than just young people not having an attention span, although I do think that that is a part of it. But it's still something that artists have so heavy on their mind. One artist I talked to who has been on a Spotify editorial before and makes, in my opinion, great music, said, "To this day though, I try my absolute hardest not to make a song over 3 minutes unless it absolutely calls for it." I asked if this was for streaming purposes or just brevity purposes, because I personally like short songs. I don't think they're a bad thing. I grew up listening to the Ramones, so like I'm kind of used to it. And he said, a little bit of both actually. I feel like I want to earn that trust with listeners to do a 4-minute song and people actually tune in. But I asked him because to me that's kind of a catch-22. And to that he responded, in a way yeah, but even with streaming and brain rot content, I don't think I can give a 3+ minute song a chance from a new artist either. 3 minutes and 15 seconds is cool, but 3:30 and up from a new artist is pushing it. I always felt like the songs that pop off the most, have more replay value, are always like 2 minutes 30 seconds and under. Is that really the case? Let's look at it. Let's go back to some of those big breakout songs. Sure enough, $1 Million Baby and Boy's a Liar are both under 3 minutes long. Benson Boone's Beautiful Things is smack in the middle at 3 minutes exactly. And Driver's License is an eternity at a little bit over 4 minutes. What about the songs on New Music Friday? I did the same box plot analysis again, and the median here was 3 minutes and 1 second. The average length was 3 minutes and 6 seconds. The biggest outlier was a 6-minute dance track from an artist named Enamor. The shortest song was an indie pop song from an artist named Mark Indigo, checking in at 1 minute and 40 seconds. It looks like 3-minute songs are totally acceptable to get playlisted. In fact, 52 out of the 100 songs on the playlist clocked in at 3 minutes or longer. So I think we can debunk the idea that songs have to be under 3 minutes to be successful on a playlist. What does it all mean? So if we look at the data that I got, we can say that there really is no such thing as playlist core. All of these artists and the things that they're telling me, their thoughts are irrational and they don't align with what we see on popular playlists. You can have intros, you You can have songs longer than 3 minutes. You can have little indulgent moments in your songs, weird sound bites. I started to wonder if this video was a waste of time, an excuse to yap for 20 minutes and do some box plots. But then it hit me. Playlist core isn't about what's in the songs. It's about what isn't. All of these artists are telling me and telling the world that this is the kind of stuff they think about and consider when they're in the studio. As the legendary late producer Quincy Jones once famously said about the creative process, God walks out the room when you're thinking about money. God probably leaves when you're thinking about a playlist too. So rather than think about the characteristics that unite all of these playlist core songs together, think about what's not there to set them apart. The weird decisions that an artist decides not to make when they're like, I don't know, will somebody skip this song if I do this? Is this gonna throw people off too much? The third verse or even the second verse that the artist doesn't record because they're like, we're already at 1:45. This is long enough. Just throw it up there. They start counting how long it is in their computer before they hit export. The bridge that they skip, the indulgent intro that maybe at 20 seconds they felt like was a little too much. The fun little instrumental moment that they just don't add, they don't put in the song because they're like, what's the point? Just listen to what some of the artists who made that actual perfect fit content said about the experience. The goal, for sure, is to be as milquetoast as possible. Nothing that could be even remotely challenging or offensive. You're just a piece of the furniture. The creative process was more about replicating playlist styles and vibes than looking inward. It's kind of like taking a standardized test, where there's a range of right answers and a far larger range of wrong answers. It feels like someone is giving you a prompt or a question, and you're just answering it, wondering whether it's actually your conviction or not. Nobody I would know would ever go into the studio and record music this way. Now, it might not be as drastic as it is for those PFC artists, those mercenaries, but there's no doubt that fragments of that same mindset are seeping into many studios across the world. Maybe even your own, maybe even my own. If artists are telling us that they're thinking about it, then they're thinking about it, and it is affecting the process. We can't just discount it, throw it out. It's real and it's out there. The data that I was able to dig up, and you can take it with a grain of salt, should be a message to all artists, myself included, maybe you watching included, that we don't need to worry so much about these parameters. Of course, we all say that we're gonna put the art first, but most artists will admit that they've bent their own rules a little bit, or gone with something other than their instincts, especially when they get a little dopamine hit from getting that first big playlist and they come scratching back like Tyrone Biggums. It's positive reinforcement, so you're like, how do I please that person even more? And restricting your own creative decisions in the name of getting on a playlist could actually be stopping you from sticking out more and making people develop that deeper connection to your work. I bet those decisions are more likely to do that than they are to get you on a playlist if you weren't going to get on it otherwise. Spotify might be manufacturing this perfect fit content, this playlist core for certain genres that people tend to listen to in the background. Don't do their jobs for them and make your music fit their box. When we think about artists who have really broken through in the past year or two, many of them have a distinct sound or song structure that counters many of the things that we talked about in this video. Think about Dijon ruining his voice on purpose to record a song like Rodeo Clown. Or McGee playing his guitar in a way that used to get him kicked out of live bands on tour because they thought it was not what they were looking for. Or 454 ending most of the songs on his first tape with like 2 minutes of the same song slowed down. These are the people that we should be looking up to. And not necessarily doing the exact same thing as them, to be clear. But they ignored the voices in the room who were like, what if you made this a little more palatable for a playlist? They followed their convictions and they were rewarded for it. So let's all be more like them. If you like this video, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe. I post a video about music every week. If you want to see those videos early, go to my Instagram, HADJI Gaviota, throw me a follow, and join my broadcast channel. I post all my videos in there one day early. Also, I've got a new song out called Fearless. I'm gonna put the link to that in the description. And there's much more coming, including another song this month. And you're gonna hear more about that next week. Let me know what you want me to cover next. Peace.